lot of people completely misunderstand Joel. Like, when people talk about him, they always talk about the version with Ellie. The one who protects her, risks everything for her, cares again. And yeah, that version of Joel is real. But that's not the whole story. Because if you really pay attention to what happens in this game, Joel didn't just become a better person. He became a different kind of person. And I don't think people realize this. That change is exactly what got him killed. Because before Ellie, Joel knew how this world worked. He knew you don't trust strangers. You don't take risks. You don't open up. And most importantly, you don't save people you don't know. That version of Joel, the cold one, the one people don't like to talk about, that version survives. He makes the hard choices. He does what he has to do. And yeah, it's ugly, but it works. Then Ellie shows up, and slowly, everything changes. He starts trusting again, starts caring again, starts becoming human again. And that sounds like a good thing. But in a world like The Last of Us, that's where things get dangerous. Because when you start caring, you start taking risks. You hesitate. You open doors you would have never opened before. You give people chances. And all it takes is one wrong person. So in this video, we're not just going through Joel's story. We're breaking down exactly how he changed, and why that change might be the exact reason he didn't make it. And trust me, by the end of this, you might not see Joel the same way again. So yeah, if you like this kind of storytelling, drop a like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Alright, so here's part 1. And this is where we really need to look at Joel honestly. Not as the guy people loved later, but as the man he actually was before Ellie ever changed him. Because if we're being real, Joel before Ellie was not a good person. And I don't even mean that in some edgy or exaggerated way. I mean, the game makes it pretty clear. This guy had become ruthless. After Sarah dies, Joel doesn't just become sad. He becomes harder. Like, a part of him just shuts down, and after that, survival becomes the only thing left. And when you live like that for years, decades even, it changes the way you look at people. You stop seeing strangers as people with stories and feelings, and you start seeing them as threats, problems, or obstacles. That's the version of Joel Tess knew. That's the version of Joel that survived all those years. Quiet, brutal, practical. The kind of man who already knows what needs to be done before anyone else even says it. And the scary part is, he's good at it. Not because he enjoys it, but because he's been living this way for so long that it's basically second nature. There's this feeling around Joel early on that he's always expecting the worst. Like he already assumes people will lie, betray, attack, steal. So why give them the chance? And honestly, in that world, that mindset makes sense. Because kindness gets punished. Trust gets punished. Hesitation gets punished. So Joel becomes the kind of man who acts first. The kind of man who keeps moving. The kind of man who doesn't let himself feel too much, because feeling too much is what got him destroyed the first time. And I think that's the part people sometimes skip over. Joel didn't become cold for no reason. He became cold because warmth didn't survive in that world. Love didn't protect him. Being a father didn't save Sarah. Being human didn't save him from pain. So he adapted. He became smaller emotionally, but tougher everywhere else. And yeah, that version of Joel is harder to like. But that's also the version that made it through. No false hope, no blind trust, no opening up, just survival. And that's why part 1 matters so much. Because before we talk about how Ellie changed Joel, we have to understand just how far gone he already was. He wasn't waiting to become soft again. He wasn't secretly healing. He had already decided what kind of man he needed to be. And for a long time, that version of Joel worked. But then, Ellie shows up.
All right, so now Ellie comes into the picture, and this is where things start to change, but not in some instant dramatic way. At the beginning, Joel really doesn't care about her. To him, she's just cargo, something he's been asked to deliver, and once that's done, he's out. And you can actually see that in how he talks to her. He keeps everything short, doesn't really engage, doesn't try to connect. He's just doing what he has to do and keeping his distance because that's what's kept him alive all these years. But Ellie isn't like the people Joel is used to dealing with. She doesn't stay quiet, she keeps talking, she jokes around, she asks questions, and she doesn't really give him that emotional distance he's comfortable with. And at first, Joel kind of resists that. You can tell he's trying not to get attached, trying to keep things strictly business, but over time it stops working. Because what really changes things isn't one big moment, it's a lot of small ones. It's the conversations they have, the situations they survive together, the moments where Joel actually has to rely on her, and she proves that she can handle herself. And slowly, without him even realizing it, that wall he built over all those years starts to come down. You see him start paying more attention to her, not just because it's part of the job, but because he actually cares. He starts teaching her things, watching out for her, making sure she's okay, and that's not something the old Joel would have done. And I think this is the important part, because this isn't just Joel protecting someone, this is Joel becoming human again. The same guy who couldn't trust anyone is now trusting Ellie to have his back. The same guy who shut himself off completely is now opening up, even if it's just a little bit at a time. And it's not a clean change either. He still pushes her away sometimes, still tries to create distance, still acts like he doesn't care, but it's obvious that he does. Because Ellie isn't just some random kid to him anymore. She reminds him of what he lost, and more importantly, she gives him something he hasn't had in a long time, a reason to keep going. And by the time you reach the end of their journey, that change is complete. Ellie isn't just part of the mission anymore, she's everything to him. Which is exactly why, when he's finally put in a position where he might lose her too, he can't accept it. And that decision, choosing Ellie over everything else, that's the moment where Joel fully becomes a different person from who he was before. He's not the cold, detached survivor anymore. He's someone who cares again, someone who's willing to risk everything for another person. And that might sound like growth, and in a lot of ways it is. But in a world like this, that kind of change doesn't come without consequences. And that's what we need to look at next.
All right, so now we get to part 3, and this is where you really start to see the full impact of that change. Because by the time we see Joel again later on, he's not the same man anymore. He's older, sure, but it's more than that. There's a calmness to him that wasn't there before. He's not constantly on edge, not expecting something to go wrong every second. And a big part of that is where he is now. He's living in Jackson, a place that actually feels normal. There are people, routines, safety, something close to a real life. And for the first time in years, Joel isn't just surviving anymore. He's actually living. And you can see it in the little things. He plays guitar, he talks to people, he helps out around the town. He's part of a community. The same guy who used to avoid people at all costs is now surrounded by them, trusting them, working with them. And that's not something that just happens randomly. That's because of Ellie. She didn't just change how he feels, she changed how he lives. But here's where it gets interesting, because even though Joel has changed, the world hasn't. It's still just as dangerous, just as unpredictable, just as brutal as it always was. The only difference now is Joel isn't the same kind of man dealing with it. Before Ellie, Joel would have questioned everything. He would have kept his guard up, assumed the worst, and avoided unnecessary risks. But now, he's more open. He's more willing to trust people. He's not constantly looking for danger the way he used to. And again, that sounds like a good thing. But in a world like this, it can also be a weakness. Because when you stop expecting the worst, that's when it catches you off guard. And I think that's the version of Joel we see in that moment with Abby. Not the ruthless survivor from before. Not the guy who would have immediately questioned everything. But someone who's been living in relative peace for a while. Someone who's gotten used to helping people again. Someone who doesn't immediately see danger in every stranger he meets. And that's a huge shift from who he used to be. Because if you really think about it, the old Joel probably wouldn't have put himself in that situation. He wouldn't have been as open, as trusting, as willing to go along with it. But this version of Joel, the one Ellie helped bring back, he makes a different choice. And that choice sets everything in motion. Because this isn't just about Joel becoming a better person. It's about how that change affects the decisions he makes in a world that hasn't changed at all. And sometimes, those decisions don't end well. And that brings us to Abby. All right. So now we get to part 4. And this is where everything we talked about actually comes together. Because this moment with Abby, it's not random. On the surface, it just looks like another encounter. A stranger in trouble, a horde of infected chaos. The kind of situation Joel has been through 100 times before. Abby's running for her life. She's completely overwhelmed. And if Joel and Tommy don't step in right there, she's dead. And Joel doesn't hesitate. He helps her. And that right there, that decision, says a lot about who he is now. Because the Joel we talked about earlier, the one from before Ellie, doesn't do that. He doesn't risk himself for a stranger like that. He doesn't get involved unless he has to. But this Joel, the one who's been living in Jackson, the one who's gotten used to helping people again, he makes a different call. And at first, it works out. They escape together, they fight their way through, and Abby leads them somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere that feels like a break from all the chaos outside. And this is where it really gets uncomfortable, because Joel lets his guard down. Not completely, but enough. He walks into that place, surrounded by people he doesn't know, and he doesn't treat it like a threat. He treats it like a situation he can manage. And again, that's not the old Joel. The old Joel would have been more cautious. He would have questioned it more, kept distance, stayed alert. But this version of Joel, he's different now. He trusts the situation just enough. And that's all it takes. Because Abby wasn't just some random survivor. She was looking for him. Everything that just happened wasn't luck. It was the moment she'd been waiting for. And Joel walked straight into it. And that's what makes this scene so heavy. It's not just that Joel gets caught off guard. It's why he gets caught off guard. Because the version of him that would have seen this coming, that version is gone. And the one that replaced him is the one standing in that room. And from this point on, there's no fixing it. There's no getting out of it. Everything that changed in Joel leads right here. And now, we have to look at what that really means. All right, so now we get to the final part, and this is where everything actually comes together. Because when people talk about Joel and Abby, they almost always reduce it to something simple, like Joel was right and Abby was wrong, or the other way around. But if you actually look at what happens in the story, it's not that clean at all. Joel's decision at the hospital makes complete sense from his point of view. He already lost Sarah, and after everything he goes through with Ellie, he's not willing to lose another daughter figure, no matter what the cost is. So when he finds out the Fireflies are going to operate on her and she's not going to survive, he doesn't even really hesitate. He goes in, kills everyone in his way, and takes her out of there. And emotionally, you understand that. It doesn't feel like a villain decision when you're watching it. It feels like a father refusing to lose his child again. But the important part is what that decision leaves behind. Because Joel doesn't just save Ellie, he destroys an entire group in the process. The Fireflies are basically finished. Marlene is gone, and the people in that hospital, they weren't just random enemies. They were part of something bigger. And one of those people was Abby's father. So from Abby's perspective, this isn't some random act of revenge. This is the man who killed her dad, wiped out her group, and took away what she believed was a chance to fix the world. She grows up with that loss, and everything she becomes is shaped around that one moment. So when she finally finds Joel, she's not seeing him as the character we've been following. She's seeing the person who destroyed her life. And that's the key difference in perspective. Because to us, Joel is the guy who saved Ellie. But to Abby, Joel is the guy who took everything from her. And when you put those two perspectives next to each other, you start to see what the game is really doing. Joel's actions weren't just right or wrong, they had consequences. And Abby isn't just a villain, she's the result of those consequences. In a way, they're actually very similar. Joel killed to protect someone he loved, and Abby kills because someone she loved was taken from her. They're both acting out of the same emotion, just from opposite sides of the story. And that's why this moment hits so hard. It forces you to realize that there isn't a clean hero and villain here. It's just people reacting to loss, making choices, and dealing with what comes after. And if you go back to everything we talked about earlier, it also connects back to Joel's change. Because the version of Joel that saves Abby, the one who's more open, more willing to help, less guarded, that version of Joel is the one who ends up in that room. The older version of him, the colder version, might have handled that situation differently. So, in a way, it's not just his past catching up to him. It's also who he became that puts him there. And that's what makes the whole thing feel so real and uncomfortable. Joel isn't just a hero who was taken out unfairly. And Abby isn't just someone who shows up out of nowhere to do something evil. They're both shaped by the same world, the same kind of loss, and the same cycle of violence that never really ends. And by the end of it, you're left with something that doesn't give you an easy answer. Just the realization that in this world, doing the right thing for yourself can still make you the wrong person in someone else's story. And that's exactly what Joel became. If you watched till the end, respect. But seriously, whose side are you on here? Because I feel like there's no easy answer. Drop it in the comments. And if you liked this, like and subscribe. I've got more coming.